afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I can see loads of people joining us from all over the place. Warren, how you doing? I am having a great day. Hope you are as well. Let us know where everybody's watching from. Got Linda, Angelica, Sean, Marcus, Peter already jumped on here today. Everybody will get a notification who registered as well now, so we'll get more people. And we are streaming this live as well into Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So I'm joined by Ben Keene today. We are talking tribe building, how to create and strengthen community within your business. So haven't seen Ben for a while, but been following his progress. We both used to work with, you might still do actually, with Virgin Startup as mentors and business advisors. And I know, been following your progress with Rebel Book Club. I know lots of people who are super involved with that as well, and seeing you do your crowdfunding as well. I'm building this awesome community, so I don't think there's anybody better qualified to talk about this subject. And I'm really keen because I've just started launching a new website this week called Podpreneur, but we started a Facebook group and it's literally gone during lockdown from 0 to what is it now, about 600 potential podpreneurs or podcasters, and already had like 6 people launch new podcasts. So really interested to know more about how to actually nurture that community that we started. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ben, and yeah, let us know where you're watching from. Sarah's from Glasgow, Marcus is in Buckinghamshire, Chris is there as well from Kent. So we're covering the whole country today. Awesome. Thank you all for joining. As always, if you pop your questions in the chat box on the right hand side, that will mean that both Ben and I see them, rather than using the question box, which means only I get to see them. So pop them in there, and I'll hand over to Ben. Take it away, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to be here, be part of a festival, even though we're all at home, especially an enterprising one. Always a good one. Nice to see you, everybody. What I'd love to hear as well, if you pop in the chat, is like your questions, but if you've been involved with building community yourself, any kind, whether it's been business or maybe closer to home, and what you've learned from it, biggest challenges, and or the biggest successes of it as well, because it's not an easy thing to do, and we're all part of it in some shape or form. So I want to share today with you, I want to share a few stories of some of the communities I've been involved with building. Mainly they are built around businesses and trying to solve a problem in the world or go on a big adventure together. So they're quite purposeful, focused communities. And some of the lessons I've learned from that over the last sort of 15 years or so. And then I'm going to share a few tactics for what I've learned from that, and what works and maybe what doesn't. And a little structure that might then help you with your own community building now or in the near future, because they can be complicated, overwhelming things. But I thought I'd start with a sort of a love books. This isn't just for show. It's I run a book club, so I draw on these all the time. But start with an old friend. You probably know this guy, Mr. Seth Godin. You get his daily newsletter, one of the best sort of short writers online. And he wrote this great book, which has influenced many people, I think, around community building, called Tribes, which you don't need to go and read, but it is quite a short one. But anyway, his definition of a tribe, which I think is useful for what we're talking about today, he says, a tribe is a group of people connected to one another, connected to a leader, and connected to an idea. For millions of years, human beings have been part of one tribe or another. A group needs only 2 things to be a tribe: a shared interest and a way of communicating. So even what we're doing this morning is a little bit tribal. We've got a shared interest and we are communicating in some shape or form. But really, tribes begin because someone says, I'm going to do this thing, come and join me. And if you think back to the kind of the example of like Danny Wallace, before he wrote Yes Man, that sort of like, I don't know if you ever remember that book from I think it was early 90s, where it was called Join Me, and he took out an ad in a paper and it said, join me, and then his postal address. And that was it. There was no reason for joining. And people started sending him letters saying, Danny, I want to join you. I really want to be part of this. I can't wait to see what we do together. And it's the story of like what happened when you invite people to join you in that kind of cult-like journey. So I'm not proposing that as a solution to community building, but it is the key part, is inviting people to join you on a journey somewhere, and that excitement. So I've got a few stories here, so I'll just put these slides live. So I'm going to move away from the questions for a minute, but I will come back to them for sure. So how to bring people together to solve problems? Yeah, it's easier to do it together. So the starting point for me on all of this is about asking the right kind of questions, or not even the right kind of questions, just asking good questions, being curious. Now, if you're entrepreneurial by nature, or you've become that way, you are naturally or by habit curious. So this is really important when you're thinking about community building. So this is a question my I think she was 4 at the time, 4-year-old daughter asked me, "Daddy, why doesn't the sea fall off the world when we were watching the sunset into the sea?" You know, it's a very clear, obvious, direct question, but it's quite a tricky one to answer to a 4-year-old straight away. In the next breath, "Daddy, when a baby has 2 dads, where does she get her milk?" You know, in the fridge maybe, but it's like, children are brilliant at asking really direct, clear questions about what they're observing in front of them. And we start to ask complicated or non-direct questions as we get older in life. So it's getting back to that sort of clarity of like, what are we really curious about, and how can we ask a good question? And if you think about some of the most, in hindsight, powerful or best questions you've asked, either of yourself or of someone else: will you marry me? Would you like to start a business with me? What if we tried this? And what they led to, you can see the importance of asking good questions. So that's the starting point, really. So here's a couple of questions that I've asked myself over the last 15 years that have led to interesting outcomes and community building projects. The first one was a pretty big one for me, at least. So I was in my mid-20s, and there was a space called, in fact, I'm just going to jump out these slides here because I would love to see some hands raised. Did anyone here who's watching this at the moment have a MySpace account? Give us a wave if you had a MySpace account or an MSN Messenger account. Yeah. Warren was on there. You had that too, Pete? Yeah. MSN Messenger, MySpace. So MySpace in the mid sort of 2000s was the social network. It was the online community, and it was based around music. Another quiz question: did anyone ever, can you remember the first band that truly like launched off the back of MySpace successfully, without having a big record label behind them, and then they went global quite quickly? Chris, you're going for gold today, Chris. That is the correct answer. The Arctic.
Is it? I was going to say that.
There you go. And what was it, for a bonus point, what was the single that launched them globally off the back of MySpace? This is what you're here for, the music quiz.
Indeed.
So yeah, I bet you look good on the dance floor. There you go.
Hey.
You beat me just about. That's nice of you to pay that compliment to a stranger on the internet. So yeah, that's what happened. They went global off the back of MySpace, and it was all around community building, and that shook up the music industry. And a lot of industries obviously follow innovation in music. So anyway, in terms of how it impacted me asking this question about building a sustainable community on a remote island, is I was writing a blog about career breaks at the time, and it was my way of trying to get questions and ideas out into the world. And a guy got in touch with me on MSN Messenger, and he said, "Have you seen what's happening on MySpace for the Arctic Monkeys?" And I was like, "Who are you? What are you talking about? Why are you contacting me?" And he gave me a bit more of the backstory, and he said, "Do you think a similar thing might work in a physical place, or on like in a travel space? So could you have a place in the world that was connected to an online community?" And I was like, this is an interesting question. Like in 2020, you know, even a water bottle has an Instagram account, right? But back then, in 2005, the idea of physical places, whether it was desert islands or cafes or hotels having their own social media profiles, was a very new, it was a new concept. So we thought, well, this would be cool if we could build an online community around a destination. If so, where would it be? and that online community would support it, getting involved with the story, maybe even fundraise for the project and so on. So I thought this was a really interesting idea. So we threw this question together, and then we went on Google and tapped in islands for sale or islands for rent, and that takes you into kind of whole world of super rich people and yachts, but also amazing islands around the world that you can get sent to your inbox every day. And we figured out that we could potentially rent an island if we got a crowd together. So this is what we did. We launched something called Tribewanted, and we said, do you want to be part of this online community that's going to build a sustainable tourism community? And we found this island in northern Fiji through a random internet trail that eventually led us to a chief on this island who's looking to rent it and build an ecotourism project there. So that's where we went, and we launched this project, and we got enough attention and members to join that we were able to fundraise, or at least pay for the lease of the island for 3 years, and invest in that local community and build it. So you can see on this, in this picture, the 3 little houses that were there, and that flat land, those sort of palm trees, is where we built our sustainable tourism project alongside the local community. And we had a 5-year adventure there. Here we go. This is a nice view of it. So this
beautiful.
Is, sorry, Pete.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. Wow. It's a kind of paradise in many ways. And so if you think from a community building perspective, this was almost, you know, the reason it got a lot of publicity at the time was because this was sort of ticking all those boxes of like, okay, so a group of young people go to a remote island. It was a bit like The Beach or Lord of the Flies or anything like that. And they're going to build this new kind of community with local partners and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they were waiting for everything to go wrong. And of course, there were lots of challenges with this project, but we did manage to get through them and learn a lot about the community building in the process. And one of the biggest things I learned in that journey was that the conversation between, when you're talking across cultures, especially when you're community building, you can be speaking the same language, in this case, English. The Fijian community we work with spoke really good English. And you can speak the same language, but actually it's very easy to misunderstand each other because of the cultural differences. So in traditional Fijian culture, you say yes to everything, whether you mean it or not, because you want to help. And so you can say, can we borrow your boat? Yes, but what they don't necessarily mean yes. And so it gets complicated quite quickly. And we know this in business too. Here you go. Here's a picture of me looking like we're auditioning for the series of Lost with my first business partner in Fiji. So Tui Mali, 65-year-old island chief who'd never been online at that stage anyway. And we helped bring people there and investment into the community, and he shared his culture and land, and it was a wonderful experience. And I think one of the other big learnings from this journey of community building there was, like, you don't know who your partners are going to be until you are aligned on your mission. So when you're aligned, like any good business partnership, when you're aligned on a mission together to solve a problem, to generate revenue, whatever it is, you're much more likely to build a stronger community. So your purpose, your reason for existence as a community is crucial in terms of building it. So that was Tribewanted. I could talk to you about that all day because it was a great adventure, but I can't right now. So the next question I asked is, not I asked, a good friend of mine asked, and I got involved with trying to help solve it, was what if we could turn underprivileged talent into role models? So I'm just going to talk to my daughter really quickly. I'm going to be coming in a few minutes, okay? I'm chatting. Okay. What if we could turn underprivileged talent into role models? So this was in Ghana in West Africa, where a good friend of mine was traveling, and he'd helped get involved with starting a small football charity to fund and support underprivileged kids who are very talented and motivated to try and build their football skills and build a career there. 20 years later, Right to Dream is the leading young sports football academy across the continent, both for boys and girls, and they've won every under 15 tournament multiple times all over the world. So the idea there was, like, how can you, by starting with a big question and starting with a few players and a bit of support, how can you build a global community around supporting young underprivileged talent? That's over. So these are big questions we're asking at the stage, and they don't always have to be it, but asking big questions often leads to a great start of a new community. What if we could walk on water? Well, this was a group of people. It was Dutch people who wanted to start a new kind of school, a creative leadership school. This was about 10 years ago. and I was lucky to be part of the first class. So the school is called Think, THNK.org. And the way they built their community of participants from around the world, once they got them there, was to take them on this sort of classic team building days. This is up in the north of the Netherlands, where you can walk at low tide across to one of the islands. And it's thinking about, this plays into the idea in terms of community building of ritual. Like, what is the thing that's unique to what you do? It doesn't have to be as spectacular as this, or going to desert islands, or starting football academies, but what is the thing that's unique and special to your community that's going to like make people feel like they're part of it? And it doesn't have to be weird, some weird funny handshake, but it can be an entertaining thing, whatever it is. But what's the thing that makes people go, oh, I've been initiated, I'm part of this tribe now? And then you celebrate properly as a community as well on Queen's Day in Amsterdam. So there we go. And then another question, what if we could help people love Mondays? So a couple of guys who were stuck in their jobs, sort of the last time we went through a big economic downturn in 2008, and they were like, there's got to be more to life than this, even though we're very lucky to be part of, have these great jobs. We're not that happy, and we'd like to do something more fulfilling, more creative, more impactful with our careers. They couldn't find the community that was going to help them do that, so they decided to start their own. They started to do it by having meetups in a cafe through friends of friends, and they said, if you don't like your day job, or you don't like Mondays, come and meet us and we'll talk more about how we can help each other. And they, alongside that, they started the newsletter, which was exciting opportunities in the world today, whether they were jobs or adventures. And people started sharing it, and they became known as an organization called Escape the City, which I've been involved with a lot over the last decade. I don't know if people have come across it. And it was really just built on this idea that life's too short to not be working on something that matters to you, which I'm sure will resonate hugely with this community and people as part of Festival of Enterprise. And the thing that we learned building Escape the City, certainly in the early years, the trade-off between making that transition from pre-escape, stuck, to post-escape, doing something more that we loved, however hard it was. There was pretty much everything was an upside, felt more in control, had more positive impact, our well-being increased, all those good feelings. And our financial security, surprisingly, was not compromised, or at least our perception of it wasn't compromised, it didn't go down. But a lot of this wouldn't have happened without that feeling of like, I'm doing this as part of a group of people. So a lot of the stuff we did at Escape City was all around, how can we make this, instead of making a career change by yourself, how can you do it as a group? And that was really powerful, and still is. And one of the nice stories that came out of that from a business point of view was Pippa Murray, who, this is in our backyard in Battersea. So this was 10 years ago now. And we ran a little competition called Escape to the Shed, and Pippa won it. And it was basically like, if you win this competition with your idea, you can stay in the shed in our back garden for 3 months rent free, and we'll support you with whatever your venture escape project is. So Pippa moved in, and she launched something called Pippa Nut, which I don't know if anyone enjoys, but very successful nut butter brand and product.
Yeah, I didn't know that was the story was tied to you with that. Yes.
Yeah, so that it was all Pippa, but we just gave her the space for a few months so she could double down. Because for a lot of people, that question of, shall I launch this project, this community, comes down to creating obviously the time and space in your life to do it, and going for it, as we know with business. And winning that little competition was her way of being able to go for it. And she spent most of that summer building a community online to then go and crowdfund, as well as crunching nut butters and selling them in markets on Saturday mornings. And then the final question, I guess, that has led to the community I'm really focused on now is this question of what if we could actually finish reading books? Maybe not as big a question as some of the other ones I'd asked, but actually a really interesting one. So a friend and I realized that we actually had a similar type of books piled up on our Kindles that were all read between 10 and 20%, or not past chapter 3. And the Japanese have a word for this. They call it sonduku, which is like this never-ending pile of books on your table that you're like, I want to read this, or like, it's that idea of like your curiosity getting the better of you, and you can't consume it all. So we're like, let's help people, ourselves and others, read more effectively and better habits, and get value out of books, especially non-fiction books, which we're interested in. So we started Rebel Book Club, which was 5 years ago this month. And every month we've read one non-fiction book, and people have joined us, and we run a membership community. People are paid from day one, so there's some accountability there. And we've run lots of events, obviously now online. And that's been the journey of Rebel Book Club, and we've been able to collaborate with really. Oh, Seth's got 2 mentions today already. It must sound like he's.
So he should.
So he should. He's good on this stuff, Seth. So yeah, we've had lots of great collaborations. So those are kind of some of the questions that I've asked that have led to being part, either starting myself or being part of projects at their early stage to build community. Love that book, The 100-Year Life. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a really good one. It's quite a good one to read at the moment, I think, around framing this idea of what do multiple careers or multiple enterprises look like, rather than defining ourselves as a certain kind of identity, which none of us are here today are, because we're trying to create things and make things happen. An interesting time. So the next stage I wanted to share with you, are there any questions at this point? Sounds like Fire Festival results. Thanks, Warren. I tell you what, when I watched Fire Festival, I had some weird flashbacks. Luckily we didn't go in it with quite the same attitude or budget, otherwise it might be away. And yeah, it's sad the impact that had on the local community in Barbados. So the next stage of this is, what do you need? What do you need to build a tribe? And the number one tool in all of this is trust. And it's the kind of number one tool in anything, really, in terms of building something with other people, or maintaining or sustaining something. But what is it? Well, it's a confident relationship with the unknown. That's what trust is, which we know all about, don't we, as entrepreneurs. It is trust more than money that makes the world go round. Stiglitz, even as an economist, was right. And if you're curious, if you want to learn more about like the sort of the importance of trust in the world right now, I'd recommend Rachel Botsman, who's at Oxford, based in Oxford, great on social media in terms of sharing all this stuff, and is very connected to working with big business, especially on trust building. And she's got a great book called Who Should We Trust? And she talks about the evolution of trust. So yeah, if we zoom out in a big way, trust used to be all local. So it was all around small communities, indigenous, tribal communities, 150 people. Think of small villages today where you know everyone, or a small business or community, 150 people, you just about know everyone. You can communicate vocally, visually to everyone in person. Then it moved to institutional, so nation states, churches, and then in latter days, corporations, mainstream media, finance, big banks and so on. But we've seen in the last, only really in the last 10, 20 years that start to break down or change. And so this is what's interesting now, is that trust has started to be distributed, or there's now a lack of trust at scale in institutions. And that makes the world complicated, obviously, as we know, but also really interesting, because distributed trust leads to all kinds of different opportunities and models and so on. So it's important context when you're thinking about communities, is that especially as we build them online and internationally, is that distributed trust is it's there, it exists. And so that's what makes it easier to be able to do this now than maybe even 10 years ago. And if you look at this list of kind of brands, for want of a better word, things in the world, think about where the relationship they have with trust. So this for me is a sliding scale from something where the majority might have, where all our relationships with these names and brands might be different, but for me, the top of that, M-Pesa, and then sort of interesting sharing economy brands are the ones where trust has been built very strongly, all the way down to sort of political leaders that divided their countries in the world. And so trust plays such an important part when you're building communities. This is an interesting stat that's probably changed significantly in the last 2 months. The idea that co-working spaces were growing at phenomenal paces, and this idea that trust is distributed across physical space. And now we're seeing that shift even more online in the last few weeks. So that it's really interesting to see what's happening. So in terms of business models for tribe building community, because I see so many people attempt to build communities, and I've been one of them, but not do it with a particularly effective business model. And I'm trying to get better at this. So the key here is thinking about how people are going to stay loyal, how you're going to keep delivering quality, and how you'll keep going to keep sharing what you're doing. And these are all leadership skills that really should be, I believe should be across every kind of business we're building, but they're especially important when we're talking about community building, where you're inviting people to play a part in the journey itself. So if you can get trust built across the network in different places, and you've got a very clear purpose about where you're going, what you're doing, you're on your way to having a happy tribe or a happy community. So that's the kind of backstory of it all. Here's some nice examples beyond the ones that I've been involved with. I think they do it really well. So Far Sounds, the Airbnb of music gigs. They got to, I believe, in February this year, 5,000 gigs in a month in over 200 cities around the world. Really fantastic, sort of all about supporting artists, up and coming artists, all about like spreading the word of good music and bringing back the intimacy to live music events and community building. I actually spoke to Rafe Offer at another event, who's the founder of So Far, last week, and asked him what happened since the crisis, and he said, I thought he was going to be like, it's been the worst few weeks of our life. Because they are completely dependent on in-person events. But he actually said, I'm so glad we spent 10 years working hard to build community and not just run events, music, be a marketplace for local events. Because now we have this real coming together, like everyone's in the same boat. All the artists are struggling because they depended on the revenue of these events and the publicity from these events to grow. And we're able to support each other. We've raised money for artists. We're supporting each other. We're figuring out ways through this. So that's the upside of community, is when the going gets tough and you're in it together, as we've seen, in the healthcare communities in the world today. It's really powerful. It brings people together. So they're hard to build, but when the going gets tough, they're very, very valuable. Other projects I think I'm a fan of at the moment that are doing really well. Oddbox, started by a couple, Emily and Deepak, a few years ago, and they were just trying to figure out how to solve food waste. And they started buying wonky fruit and veg from their local market in East London, and then going and selling it, to the back door of restaurants. They now have a very successful veg box scheme. I think they've like tripled or quadrupled the number of boxes they're sending out in the last 2 months. It's been phenomenal growth for them. But a lot of their stuff they did in the early days was about supporting their local neighborhood, about connecting people who cared about food waste, about saying, how can we get this produce to you, take it from the market to you? And the business model was really tough. They knew they'd have to scale. But a really great positive sort of community and brand building story for our times. One of my favorite kind of old ones, going back to the travel, is the Adventurists. So these guys were all about like, how do we make life less boring? And like drive 1 liter cars to Mongolia, rallies, and they've done loads of other crazy stuff at the same time, raising a huge amount of money for Cool Earth, the rainforest charity. So what I love about the Adventurists is this idea that when you join them, the mindset is all around yes, taking risks, but also being creative and letting that kind of like spirit of real adventure come out. And I think where Tough Mudder had that for quite a long time, but maybe it got too contrived and that their business model ran into trouble. Whereas I think the Adventurists maybe haven't been so financially successful, but their community is really impressive, and their fundraising work as well. But it's also applicable to, really boring products and services that we might call. So Bulb is a energy provider. It's a renewable energy provider that's only been around, I think, 3 years, but it's one of the fastest growing utility companies, I think, certainly in the UK, if not beyond. And their trick has been from the start to make you feel like you're on this mission with them to like get more green, cleaner energy into homes. And they make it easy to spread. So their trick is that it's not a trick at all. It's an old school sales method. It's like, £50 if you sign up via my link, and I get £50 in my account. And you think, well, hold on, how does this work at scale? But essentially, they built this massive network of sales reps for themselves who also happen to be their customers. this has been done before, but the feeling of the brand
Yeah.
of the community is like we're doing this together and we're making a dent as well as saving money by doing this. So they've just executed on it really, really well. And then last couple of examples. I don't know if you come across this. This is really on the social enterprise space. So Beam was started by Alex Stephanie a few years ago, and he used to be CEO of Just Park, you know, the parking app, parking people's driveways and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And so he knew a lot about the sharing economy. He was like, why? But he wanted to play a part in solving the huge problem of homelessness. And so he dug into that, and he was like, well, what if we could help people? What he kept hearing is people wanting to reskill themselves, so to get back to work. And so he's like, well, what if we could crowdfund people to reskill themselves back to work? So he started with one guy, helped him retrain as a plumber by getting a few people to chip in, and then it's just grown from there. So it was this. What's powerful about crowdfunding in terms of community building is people coming together, yes, through making payments, but coming together to support a cause, a product, a person, a journey, a business. And that's why I think, you know, it's so effective at sort of like, there's so many people that support crowdfunding projects, even when they're not necessarily clearly going to get a return on that investment, either through the equity, even the Kickstarter product. They don't know when or where they're going to get it, or in this case, it's obviously much more around the charitable support. But the point is, it's the feeling that being part of that, clearly in the case of Beam, but in other crowdfunding channels as well, that you get to you're part of something, and it's belonging, and that's human nature. Ella's Kitchen, great example of like how it was done in the food industry, kids industry, like feeling like you're part of like, oh, this is organic, we're doing something better for our children. And it was led with the child's voice as well. Really powerful stories. And of course, a lot of these come through what we would call now purpose-driven businesses. The B Corporation movement in the UK is fantastic as well. So that's just a personal plug for that. So those are some examples. And my last section is going to be about like the strategy for doing it yourself. So just before I dive into that,
I was going to say, do you want to answer? We've got a bunch of questions on the private channel and the public channel here. Do you want to dive into those first or after, Ben?
Yeah, if you throw a couple at me now that maybe I can try and help with, Pete.
Yeah, cool. Chris says, do you structure your questions, going back to your earlier slides, to ensure there is action?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that in sort of detail. I think the questions are really like the catalyst. So it's just like, oh, I'm interested in this. What if? Wouldn't it be better if? What would the world look like if? That's a kind of entrepreneurial mindset. In terms of like tipping them into action, I think the key is to ask someone else. So not just yourself, because otherwise it's just you and your note paper and your journal and okay, people throw this stuff out on social media, but or in their teams. But I think one of the reasons a lot of us are hesitant or have been hesitant in the past to do that is we're like, what if someone, you know, takes this idea? It's less around the idea, or like to, you know, we're too overwhelmed with information to worry about that. And the execution, as I'm about to reiterate, is the key to it all. So yeah, accountability, the best way to do it is announce it publicly. That's kind of how we launched the Island Project. We asked the question, we spent 6 weeks. And the thing that tipped me over the edge to launching that project, which was ridiculously ambitious and naive and everything else, but that's what you need to launch a big adventure kind of project, was the fact that it was something very mundane. It was the fact that I was 25 at the time, and my young person's rail card in the UK was about to expire. And for me, that was a signal that, oh, I'm about to become a real adult, not an 18-year-old adult, which we know is just, it's like maturity wise, at least for me, I wasn't an adult then. Mid-20s, I was like, I've got to start doing something. I've got to start doing something now, haven't I? Rather than just having these adventures and being part of interesting projects. And so I was like, right, the path is very clear. It's either right, try and get that graduate, you know, try and get that job, or it's about going off and doing something completely different. And that was the trigger for me. So I'd also think about like, what are the things that trigger you to act in your life? And if you're trying to turn something, push yourself into action, have those triggers nearby, or that person nearby that pushes you. The other thing that question reminds me of is when I was asking that question back then around the island adventure, I didn't tell many people because I knew that most people would go, what are you doing? That's a stupid idea. That's crazy. And so, you know, come to your entrepreneurial communities, come to those people who have that kind of growth mindset, sense of adventure, to get that energy. If you need, that's what you need to get it going, because they'll build on what you're trying to do rather than go, no, that's not going to work. If they say no, it's not going to work, it definitely won't, because it'll put you off. Any other quick questions?
Yeah, so Jeanette says, I'm glad we set up a Facebook community in 2019, but I want to bring this audience to my virtual events / in-person events. Is there a way to build this quickly, as building trust takes time? Another good question.
Yeah, so sorry, the question is around how do I translate my Facebook group into a virtual event?
Into virtual in-person events, to build quickly, as trust takes time.
Trust does take time, but actually moving into different activities doesn't. And the key to it all is knowing your community and what's the reason they're all on your Facebook group? What did they come there in the first place? Like, what are you helping them with? What are they helping each other with? And the answer to that question will then lead to how you frame, here's what we're doing next. And then it's about testing. And you say, right, the great thing about having a community of some kind in place is that you can say, oh, we're going to try and do this thing. But if it's not aligned to the reason they came there in the first place, or the core thread that ties them together, they're not going to, it's like, think about those subscription boxes that you get through the post, and they all have a bunch of flyers in for other subscription boxes. And the reason they're all advertising in there is not just because you like buying chocolate, you might then buy coffee. It's because you like subscription, or you're open to buying through subscription. You trust the process of subscription and delivery. And so it's thinking about what's the parallel to that? What can we help people with? And and the key obviously with community is not abusing the trust. So I think that one of the things I'm going to mention in a minute is that around strategy is not to overpromise. And so sometimes asking the smaller questions is sometimes quite, would you like to join me in doing this? Reading books, okay, not very exciting, but easy to say yes to. So shall I move on, Pete? And then I want to run through the strategy for 10 minutes so that everyone's got the tools. And then if there's any more questions after that, we can do that.
Yeah, there's a bunch more. So we'll come back and answer the other questions if you guys.
Okay, we'll try and get through them. So how are we going to go about building the tribe or growing our tribe that we've currently got? Thursday, 14th of May was last week, so I'm not up to date. But let's say Wednesday, 20th. Why is today the best day in history to start something? Well, you've already got lots of reasons. There's all the cliches, seizing the moment. If you don't do it now, you never will. All that kind of stuff. But also the context of the world we're living in, not just in the last decade, but in the last 10 weeks, is that now is the best time ever to start something. We've got the tools. Look what we're doing right now. We're sharing. This is, really cheap, quick way to connect and share tools and ideas that would have been much harder before. We can get out to new markets really quickly. We can find our niche audiences, not necessarily easily, but cheaply, and put our ideas and our sort of thoughts in front of them. We can invite people from any different part of society who is at least online to join in. So that in that way, it is a lot easier to start something. But good ideas come from different places. And I think this is something we can get hung up on, especially when community building, is to go back to that moment where you're really feeling that problem, or you want to test something out and really acting on it and inviting people to join. It's almost like thinking about who might be a good business partner for me on this. Rather than proposing, you say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to come with me? So it's more show, don't, rather than tell or ask. It's like, I'm going to try this thing. Who wants to come along? And this is a really good reminder. This is from Derek Sivers, who was the guy behind CD Baby back at the turn of the last .com crash, and managed to get in that small window between buying CDs in a shop and downloading music online and do rental CDs, which to anyone who's under 30 just seems like a stupid, ludicrous thing, but it was for a while. CDs and DVDs were rented in the post. Anyway, he was very successful at executing on that, and he's a very good guide on sort of a lot of business stuff. And one of the things that I love about him is this idea about the difference between ideas being a multiplier of execution. So if you look at this table, these are made up values, right? But it's the relationship between them that's key. So you think of a brilliant idea, say it's worth £20, and multiply it by weak execution. You still have a venture of some kind. It may not last, but you can do it for a while. Think of an average idea and execute it really well. I don't know, a rubber. It's like that's bad potentially. Thing is, every brilliant idea and everything that's successful in hindsight looks like a brilliant idea. So you could say something like, look at Airbnb. That, to me, without the execution, is a terrible idea. Like getting people to move into each other's homes. There's a massive trust issues there on both sides, but they've executed it brilliantly. They've got a big challenge right now, of course, but they have executed it brilliantly. So the point is that whatever your idea as a community or as a startup is, it's what you do with it. And especially with community building, if you don't invite people to join and try, you'll never get going. So these are the 5 R's that I've mentioned before, but these are kind of things that I think if you apply to whatever you're doing, they should help you structure your ideas of what to do next a bit more clearly. So the first one we've talked about is reason. So this is your why. How might you convince your friends and family to do things differently? What is the purpose of what you're doing? And it doesn't have to be world changing. It doesn't have to be, solve every problem in someone's life. Ideally, it doesn't. And I think actually we're probably some of the most successful communities out there are the ones that solve a very specific problem for a specific audience. And don't worry about scaling, just worry about how can I obsess around this one problem. And great businesses and products do that, and it's a really good way to think about community building as well. The second one is rituals. So what we mentioned is like the walk on the water, and in traditional cultures and indigenous communities, ritual is what really helps people identify each other. It is what makes each culture unique. But in your community, what is it that's brings people together slightly unique? So Rebel Book Club, for example, every month at our meetups, whether in person or online, we have a cocktail. So we have someone designing a cocktail that's linked to the book in some tenuous way or inspired creatively by the book and the theme. The cocktail is made and we all drink that together, or we make them at home. We do cocktails from your cupboard at the moment at home. So that's a little ritual. It's kind of not really related to improving your reading habit. It's not really related to getting value out of books, but it is our little thing that we do together. And we've done it every month, and it works really nicely. So what is your ritual? And don't force these rituals. Think about, observe as you start to get your community going. What do people keep doing that's kind of fun or different or inspiring, and then could you turn that into a ritual? And don't do something too big because it will be a lot of work. Keep it small and simple. Rhythm. This is slightly different from ritual. They can get confused, but rhythm is like the trust building sides of running a community. So what are the things that you're promising at the start that you will do, that you will keep doing? So every Monday, Escape the City sends a newsletter with 10 exciting opportunities. Now that's a big promise, but it's okay if you're willing to do that, and it's going to be a big part of building your community and your business. Then that's great. They've sent over 500 of those in the last decade. And even if you do like your job, you do love running your business, it's still a great newsletter to receive, because it's just exciting opportunities in the world that inspire you. So what is it? What's the rhythm? What's the thing that you do regularly? Rebel Book Club, it's really clear. It's one non-fiction book a month. It's one cocktail a month. It's one meetup a month. And that's our way of just saying, okay, if you're a member, you don't have to worry about that stuff. We're just going to send it to you at the right time. And that's the thing that helps build trust and also a good relationship in a community. Is church is on Sundays at 10. Okay, great. It's that feeling of being held within a group of people and you know what's coming. So think of all those institutions or communities that you're part of where you know what happens. It's that certainty that actually makes the relationship within the community stronger, and which is why they're so important right now when there is so much uncertainty. Respect. This is probably the hardest thing to build in the community, but essentially, what are your rules of the road? How are you together? How do you communicate? How do you work together? You are leading it, but what is the relationship between your members? What are the rules? And these can get complicated quite quickly if you don't get them clear up front. But it might be as simple as saying, when people sign up or join the first event or come to the online page or whatever it is, that this is how we operate. This place is to talk about books. In this way, we're not looking for grand critiques. We're just looking for people to share their insights, their feelings, and then what they learned from it. and anything related resources. So you just kind of set it up really clearly. You can use this space to connect with people like this. You can't use it to do that. And then if people abuse it, you can take it out. You can ask people to leave. But if you get that right at the start and you get your first members of your community really aligned on like what you're doing and how you behave, it's so much easier to grow it from there. If you get some difficult, challenging, influential characters early on, then it can be trickier. The culture can be, so in a small pool, one strong voice has a much bigger impact than in a larger pool, obviously. So yeah, get your rules of the road clear and keep them simple. And then finally, how are you rewarding the people who are taking part in this? Now, the reward might be really clear: a book, a cocktail, an event, new friends. But it's important to spell out, just like you would with any business, your features and benefits of buying this product or service. It's really nice organic coffee, it's fresh natural food, Pret. But like in terms of community, it's like together we will get this and this. Think of crowdfunding, what the rewards are. It's not just whatever the product is, it's the feeling of being part of this thing that you get. So be really explicit about what the reward is, especially as a team leading this, but also for your audience and your members. So those are kind of the 5 R's, which really brings it. There you go. I've got them all in a line here. So for the tactic for this, if you wanted to apply this very scientific approach to community building, would be to come up with ideas for each of them, for each stage, like for your own community, for your own idea. If you're in a team, great, do it together, do it all privately. And then throw all the ideas in the mix. When you're brainstorming ideas like this is just a general thing. I like do it anonymously so that there's no hierarchy afterwards. Like, oh, Ben's come up with these ideas, so we have to take them really seriously, or not, as the case may be. So try and do it anonymously, and then pick 1 or 2 to test and measure, lean startup style. So that would be the kind of real sort of structured approach to it. If you're an established organization or community, if you're doing it from the start, it's probably a little easier. A little less. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. Happy to take questions or feedback, and yeah, definitely can share the slides. So Peter, I don't know if you have any other questions there, or whether people have got questions or comments specifically that I can help with.
Yeah, I've just been busy taking lots of notes. Let me dive back into the questions, because there were a bunch. Yeah, Warren says, my business is an element of bringing together different tribes. What's your thoughts about building tribes but empowering other people as they have the real understanding of their network to become the leaders on my behalf? Nice one, Warren.
Yeah, so Warren, I think this empowerment's really key, and like in that sort of structure I talk about, that's what it's kind of like. What are the rules of the road? How am I, if I'm being invited to join this community, what are the roles within it? Is it really that you're going to just be able to do this? And so for an example, when we ran the island projects, as I'm sure you can imagine, it attracted all kinds of characters, and it became real life in the sense that they came to the beach and there was sort of like, oh, you're going to get to build this island paradise. And yeah, it was interesting. It's why we got a lot of attention for the project, because people knew it was going to be complicated. And so I think you've got to think about exactly what you're offering people the chance to be part of, because the risk with community building, and this is a really important point, is that if you give people a blank canvas to basically either like dump all their worries of the world into this space, like, hey, what's up? What do you need help with today? Oh, I'm feeling awful about this, and this. Or if you just say, you can do anything you want, and then like people, we should do this, we should do this, and it gets chaotic quite quickly. So it's being really clear. Empowerment is crucial in terms of like people feeling like they're genuinely contributing to the mission of what we're trying to achieve together, whatever that is. And in Rebel Book Club, it's really simple. It's like your responsibility is to keep up with your reading, and we're going to push you to do that, and then to come to our event and participate. And that's empowerment, right? And they get to vote on the next book. So they don't feel particularly radical or rebel, ironically, but they are actually it's a really simple, nice way for people to engage in something without too much effort. So yeah, sorry, that was a rambling answer.
Who wrote that quote? Keep your head in the clouds, Jeanette.
It's a really good question. It's kind of the mantra that I think it's been iterated on, but it's a mantra that I keep coming back to. And the reason why, especially in the context of community building, of keep your head in the clouds, but your feet on the ground. And I think this is super relevant to where we're at right now with what's going on outside. This idea, especially to entrepreneurship and community building, is this idea that, okay, if we write a business plan, you've got like, here's your financials, here's your plan for the next bit of time, like next few weeks, few months. And then you've got where you're trying to get to in a few years, which you're pitching to your investors or your hopes and dreams in here. And then you've got the middle ground. Now we can't control the middle ground. We couldn't control it before much. Now, as in June 2020, we control it even less. And that timeline of like what we control has come towards us, right? Because it used to be, I can control the next 6 to 12 months. Now it's like, can I control the next 6 to 12 weeks? No, the next 6 hours. No, it's like, hopefully we're back to the next few days, weeks at a time planning. And so that suits entrepreneurial mindset. But in terms of, the focus then is really about, okay, what's the overall vision here? Does that change? Does our mission change? Does what we're trying to do together change? Hopefully not, because that should stand regardless. But what are we doing right now? What our feet on the ground? What are we doing today? Well, I'm meeting you guys, giving you as much attention and energy as possible for an hour. That's my focus. There's nothing else. I mean, that's straightforward, right? But that's my feet on the ground right now. And so it's just like, and then the bit in between, leave it, let it go, because you can't control it, and it's no point, So you're going to have your financial forecast for the next 3 weeks, 3 months, and then you're going to have your 3-year one. And the kind of 3-year one, you just put to one side at the moment. You just double down on where are we at now? Where are we at now? And then it's the same with communication with your audience, your customers, your members. It's saying, right, this is where we're at today. And I've seen a lot of communication over the last few weeks. It's been brilliant because it's just been honest and transparent. But it's also been a lot of here's our take, number of corporate emails around here's our take on where we're at with COVID. It was like, I don't really care what you think. It shows the relationship I have with those brands. But also it's I'm interested in how this affects me in my life and the things I care about, or the communities I care about, or the causes I care about. So, being able to say things like, we're doing this thing now because of what's happening. And we think this will be a great way to adapt to the situation. And this is where we're at. And so, yeah, head in the clouds, feet in the ground. So don't stop dreaming. It's always going to be, there's always an upside. But keep taking those small steps every day.
I like it. It's interesting, so many or a number of the different founders, CEOs that I've spoken to over the last 6-7 weeks doing this here on live webinars have literally done that, put the 5-10 year plan to one side. We're talking $100 million businesses in some cases, and literally going, right, the focus is next 4 weeks. What are we doing?
Yeah, and I think, and so the dual things that I care about, entrepreneurship and community, they're just become really even more important right now. As entrepreneurial skills, you're seeing this in leadership skills, right? Across, especially the softer skills around the ability to empathize, be compassionate, just basically to talk the language of the people that are being hurt at the moment, is leading to stronger leadership. You've seen with the the clarity around the communication. So you're seeing, the New Zealand Prime Minister, the German Prime Minister. So the point is that they tend to, on the whole, be women over men, which says something as well. So there's something around communication and clarity and compassion, but there's also around resilience and tenacity, and then of course creativity. So that skill set, which is so crucial for getting ideas out into the world, is really important for many types of leadership leaders now. The other thing in terms of community building is that, as we were talking about earlier, is this thing of coming together. Is people come together more when there's something they stand against, or they're standing for. So war is obviously the extreme example of that, when you have a real enemy. But we have a different kind of enemy now, which is we have to come together, and it's hard because the irony is that we're coming together at a time where we can't physically be together.
Yeah.
That's why online communities and networks, as much as the screen time is a headache, it's also a really interesting time to see how it's being built. And I think what's going to be one of the things that's going to be really positive over the coming months and year is that we're going to see a lot more simplification of communication and products and services, because people cannot cope with the overwhelm of fake news, data, content, and so on. And so the products and services and communities that I think will succeed will, one, be solving real problems for people. They'll go up the priority list, look at the veg boxes. But two, their communications will be authentic and clear and simple, and they'll be easy to look at. Zoom, one click, boom.
Yeah.
It's it's won the race, hasn't it?
It has. A couple of questions to finish off. I won't hog the chat. Tom, is it easier to build a tribe than find a tribe?
No.
Definitely not.
By finding a tribe, I see what you mean. It's more about like, what's the right community for me. I know that's not an easy journey. That's life's journey, right? So I think that actually, it depends what you want to start or what you're interested in. There's, in terms of finding the right communities, audiences, and connections for you, it's all about trying. It's like dating. You've just got to go out there and join a bunch of things. It's a bit like how you might test products or services. You'll be like, oh, I'll do this for 5 minutes. It's the way I approach tools that I might use to build stuff online. I give them 10 minutes of my attention completely. And if I don't, like, if I need a new tool, and if I don't click with it within 10 minutes with my focused attention, then I'm moving on. And I think that's the same with communities, is you can like sign up to a bunch of things and just see how the communication, the language is early on. And that's, from a business point of view, is all the UX, right? It's how you onboard people, how you bring people in. It's so crucial, that copywriting, that first impression. And it's really hard to do well. I would say my personal feeling is like, it depends what stage of life you're at and what you're looking for, whether it's something completely spiritual or whether it's like a practical response to a situation in your life. But yeah, the more you try, the more chance you'll have of finding it. And if you really get stuck, then make your own, start your own, but do it if you can.
Yeah. Okay, so time for last question probably. So here's one. Have you seen changes in the type of communities or the way they're being built since the advanced use of tech, such as social media, online platforms, etc.? That's a really good question, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, totally, Chris. It's changed in many ways. That conversation we were having around trust being distributed has played a massive part in it. So globalization of tech and communications has definitely been the upside of that has been that people be able to gather around things that are important to them, regardless of where they are. And we're still talking about a bubble. We're still talking about people who have access to Wi-Fi and hardware, like smartphones and laptops, which is growing all the time. But there's still a lot of people, even in the UK, who don't have that. So there's an accessibility issue still there, and I think we've got to remember that when we're doing this stuff, who we're trying to help. But also, it's kind of like, it is easier to try the things out, and there's less to lose. Like, if you imagine trying to start something before, you have to go and put posters up, you'd have to, like, even reputationally, and you're within that sort of small little community in your village, in your town, in your neighborhood, you'd have to put yourself out there as like, I'm doing something different. Whereas now you can put yourself out there in different guises and forms online quite easily. And no one, here's a harsh reality, which I think is also a positive. No one cares. No one cares. And this is true of starting a business or building a community. No one cares unless it starts to positively or negatively impact their life. As soon as it does, then they will come back to you, and they will like, oh, Ben, this is really, I'm going to dump on we see this on Twitter, especially, people post something and it's like, but no one cares until something has real value to them, to the person that it's being put out there. So that's the great thing about, the difference between ideas and execution. Once you have helped somebody or hurt someone, hopefully not, but once you've helped somebody in their life, then they care not about you, but they care about what the thing that's helped them and which you're behind. So that's the tipping point. That's where it gets interesting, and that's why it's great at the start, because you just go, here's the thing, who wants to join? Danny Wallace style, join me. And if no one does, change your message, change your pitch, try someone else.
That's great. Finish up. Warren says, Ben, that's either the best green screen or the tidiest bookcase ever.
Warren, listen, there's this great it's on Twitter, there's a thing called Book Credibility, which was started like a month ago, and now it's got a load of followers. And all it does is it takes screenshots of people who are on news programs sitting in front of their bookcases going, you know, this is what I think about the world. And then Book Credibility just like talks about how much credibility they have depending on their alignment of books and cases and colors and all this sort of stuff. I think the only reason I do it is this marketing for Rebel Book Club. So all these books here we've read, did a book like, got this one yesterday, which is all about the positive human kindness and the sort of human nature, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, it is very deliberately set up, but it's also my work. So,
and your kids haven't pulled them off the shelves either.
They've got their own shelf that way. So love to speak with you all. Thanks so much for joining today. And if I can help with anything specifically, my social channels have got bits and pieces on which may be helpful, but even if I can help connect anyone, then find me.
Oops. That's awesome. And remind me, URL for Rebel Book. It's .club, isn't it?
Rebelbook.club if you want to sharpen your reading habits. We've got 5th birthday on Tuesday, so if you sign up before then, you can join our little party online. We're using a really cool platform called Hopin, which is really interesting. It's like Crowdcast, but with more like breakout spaces. So actually, the meetup stuff we're doing is kind of interesting as well. But yeah, it's all about reading habits and connecting with like-minded people who want to do something with the stuff they read. And awesome. Next, we're reading a book. We're reading around the theme of gender bias. So we're going to be looking at books like, I don't know which one's going to win yet, but books like this, Invisible Women, which is all about data bias in the world. So we're really interested in like, okay, there's an article I want to read about or I read about, but I don't know much more. I know it's a thing that's happening right now, like gender and data and like there's stuff happening there, but I don't have time in my life. So Rebel Book Club helps you dive into something, a bit of a boot camp, and then learn from experts. So that's what we do every month.
Great. Well, I'll send everybody who registered as well an email, and I'll link Rebel Book Club. And what's the easiest? Is just Rebel Book Club put as the link, or yourself LinkedIn or anything like that?
Yeah. So you got my name. Just I'm online wherever you want to connect. I'm online. Then give me a shout.
Okay. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. And again, lastly, looking to launch a podcast, I hear, Ben. Is that right?
Oh yeah, this is where it's
the accountability. I thought I'd bring it back.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of podcasts out there. It doesn't have to be a podcast, but I've been wanting to turn like some of these stories I've been sharing around community building into a regular thing. So podcast was one way of doing it, but like the conversation I had with the founder of Sofa Sounds the other day is like so valuable, and I'm just like, I want to share it with more people. So the podcast or the project is going to be called Tribe Builders, and it's coming soon.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Like Star Wars or Microsoft product.
Well, if I can help you in any way with the podcast, do give us a shout. Happy to have a chat with you and give you.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to see you guys. Good luck, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. We're back at 2:00 today for next one with Startups Magazine. And on that note, thank you very much indeed. Signing off.